sermon title this morning comes from what Peter offers to do there on the mountaintop. He offers to build 3 dwellings, one for Moses, one for Elijah, one for Christ. And so that's why it's 3 houses on the mountaintop. And I don't know where that picture came from. I just did a lot of Googling of 3 houses, comma, mountain. And I found that one. And that is 3 houses on a mountain. And I entitled this, and I found that picture partly because I have a tendency to agree with Peter's instinct to build a retreat center there on the top of the mountain. If any of y'all have been in my office, and I know some of y'all have, it is essentially a museum of things that tell the story of my life. I deliberately have things in there that remind me of different times in my journey and different times in my life of faith. And so I have the wing mirror from a Volkswagen Golf that I smashed off of said Volkswagen Golf when I was trying to reverse out of a bull ring in Spain, true story, at about 6 o'clock in the morning. I have hanging on my wall, a 4-foot-tall portrait of Thurgood Marshall, which hangs over my couch. This was made by some of my students in Washington, D.C., when we did a play about the civil rights movement and how their school was involved in it. I have a painting on my wall done by a friend of mine, Natalie. She painted it during a worship service that was particularly meaningful to me. And so I have filled my office, also with silly things. I have action figure Jesus and action figure Moses and bendy Jesus and silly things. But a lot of the objects in my office are meaningful to me and tell the story of different meaningful or mountaintop experiences that I have had. Right? We talk about mountaintop experiences. That is, your experiences in your life of faith that are particular high points, that are particularly, you felt a particular strong connection to God, that you felt a particular wholeness, a particular comfort, a place where you really felt God's presence. So Peter wanted to build 3 houses. I have filled my office with visual metaphors for these mountaintop experiences of mine. And so we are getting in what gets called the transfiguration, which basically just means Jesus' appearance was changed. He radiated God's glory in a way that he did not normally. That's what transfiguration means. So in the transfiguration of Christ, you have a literal and proverbial high point in Jesus' ministry. 6 days after, and it's 6 days after Peter confesses Jesus Christ to be the Son of God. 6 days after that, they go up a mountain, and there the disciples that go along see Jesus transformed. They see him glowing with light. They see him glowing with the glory of God. And then among them are Moses and Elijah. And then God speaks. All of these things carry deep significance, some of which reads on a surface level, right? God's words about claiming Jesus as his own are pretty self-explanatory. You could be understood for understanding why Moses and Elijah show up. I mean, it was great for them to come to the party. We really appreciate it, but why are you here? You see, they are deeply symbolic. And so I think we know, a fair amount about Moses. We talked about him a couple weeks ago. He's the guy, floated down the river in a basket, got rescued by Pharaoh's daughter, burning bush, set his people free, wandered in the desert, all of that, right? Okay, but one of the big important things he did is he goes up a mountain, and he brings down 2 tablets. He brings down the law. Moses goes up a mountain and comes down with the law. Moses represents the law. He is the man most associated with the giving of the law. And so it's tremendously important to the Jewish faith, this law. And so having Moses there on the mountain once again is saying, here, Jesus is connected to the law, the great lawgiver. Elijah may be a little more confusing to us. Elijah doesn't get as much discussion in Christian circles. I polled the audience at the previous service how many folks remembered what Elijah did, and I'll see if anyone's brave. Does anyone remember what Elijah did? What are the key points of Elijah's story? John, go for it.
He killed they had a big battle about who was going to do it, and he won.
Yes?
And then he worshiped Baal.
Baal, yes. So Elijah spent his prophetic career being up against the prophets of Baal. You see, King Ahab had a wife named Jezebel. Jezebel was from another country, and she wanted to bring her country's god, Baal, Baal, if you want to be really specific, but Baal, to Israel with her. And so her husband said, okay, you can do that, but we're going to do the God thing too. And this led to a lot of conflict, and Elijah's like, no, you can't do that. And so Elijah spends his whole time trying to put down the prophets of Baal and give a very stern talking to. Excuse me. I swear I'm better, folks. To put a stop to what Jezebel's trying to do. And there's a great line with the musical Godspell, just as old Elijah said to Jezebel, you better start to learn your lessons well. So he's actually a really important figure in the Jewish religion. He is one of the pillars of faith, which I don't think he gets that same treatment in Christianity. But to have Elijah show up there, Elijah is the prototype, the archetype, the prophet. And so if Moses is the law, Elijah is the prophet. And Elijah also had his own mountaintop experience where he experiences God in the calm wind that rushes by him. Elijah also ascended into heaven, having not died a human death. And so Elijah, in many ways, is a prophet that points to Jesus' ministry. And then you have the third person up there, the one we are most familiar with, Jesus himself. And so Jesus is tied to the law. Jesus is tied to the prophets. That is to say, Jesus is connected to everything that came before. But God makes a very specific point here on the mountain, that Jesus is greater than all of that. Because Moses is an important lawgiver, and Elijah is the important prophet. But only Jesus gets claimed as God's only Son, the beloved, with whom God is well pleased. And God said that first at Jesus' baptism. He says it again here in Matthew 17, but he adds to it that we are to listen to Jesus, or we are to do as Jesus says, depending on what translation you're looking at, but it is some version of listen to Jesus because he speaks for God. And so then pause for a second and think about the disciples who got to see this. They see Jesus transformed into light. They see God come down as a mist and speak directly once again. This is a really big mountaintop moment. And so it's natural that Peter wants to stay and build those 3 houses and have a little conference where they can spend more time in this moment. And Christ himself is having quite a mountaintop experience as well. Christ has been claimed by God once again. Christ has been transformed once again. Remember, Jesus is also fully human. He's experiencing this as we would experience it. It's a tremendous experience of connection with God and of confirmation that he's on the right track and that he has been empowered by God to do these things that he has been asked to do. And so for both Jesus and the disciples, this is a mountaintop experience, pointing to the fullness of who Jesus is and who Jesus will be. But they don't stay. They don't stay on that mountain. They come back down off of the mountain. Jesus leads them back to the mundane world. And that's instructive for us. We each, I hope, have experiences of great joy. Experienced tremendous moments that meant something to us in our lives of faith. And oftentimes we wonder, why you can't stay there, why church camp can't be all year round, right? It sounds like a nightmare, actually, but or why that mission trip could never end, or why that retreat could never end, or why that service could never end. But part of it is we have to go back to our lives. We have to go back to our calling. Because Jesus, when he's on that mountaintop, has not completed the work, right? He has not yet faced the cross. He has not yet gone down the painful road of his crucifixion, death, and resurrection. The work, he is God's Son, but his work as God's Son isn't done. We're at about literally the middle of the book of Matthew. Book of Matthew's 28 chapters. We're in chapter 17. We're pretty close to the middle here. Jesus has got a lot of work left to do. And so he comes back down off that mountain, propelled and strengthened and formed by what he experienced there. See, for me, I went and grabbed a piece from my office. This is an actual piece from my office. It hangs on my wall. And this is of a literal mountaintop experience for me. It's not a great, I took the picture, it's not a great picture. It's a picture of a very thin cross on top of what looks like a mound. Okay, this is on a mountain in Spain. I walked the Camino de Santiago. This is pilgrimage route across north of Spain some years ago, or several times some years ago. And the highest point of this journey that takes about 30 days is called the Cruz de Ferro, which is the Iron Cross. It's just simply describing this pole with a cross on it. And the mound that you see at the base of the cross isn't the mountain. You're standing on top of the mountain. It's a whole bunch of rocks that pilgrims have been carrying up that mountain for 1,000 years. For 1,000 years, when people start this 500-mile or more pilgrimage, they pick up a rock or bring something with them from home to represent their burdens. And they carry them in their pack or in their luggage or however they're going in their cycle bags. They carry them to the Iron Cross to lay at the foot of the cross, to understand that you are laying that burden on Christ and to be set free from that burden, to have that symbolic experience. And so for me, I had a moment like that on top of that mountain. Before I walked the Camino the first time, I had finished a disastrous relationship that really affected me badly. And so I carried a symbol of that relationship with me in my pack the whole way. And when I finally got to the cross, which is about 2/3 the way through this journey, I've already been on the road some 350 miles, I'm able to place that symbol of the relationship on that cross and be set free from it and be able to give that up to God. It took that journey, but that experience there on the mountain was one that I'll never forget, of being set free. Being set free from the pain of that loss and that failure. But I couldn't stay there. Quite frankly, I would have starved to death had I actually stayed on that mountain. There was no food. I couldn't stay there. But I carry that memory with me. That memory of God setting me free. And it serves as a very visceral reminder for me every time I look at this particular picture on the wall in my office of what God has done for me. We're about to begin the season of Lent, which is our journey to Easter. Easter is the actually most important day in the Christian calendar. Christmas has a better PR firm. Easter is actually the day because we experience resurrection. Lent is the season of preparation where we go on that journey that leads not just to resurrection, but the two things that come before that: Christ's arrest, crucifixion, and death. You have to go through that valley to understand the importance of Easter. But every year, the Sunday before Lent is Transfiguration Sunday, to have that mountaintop experience. that it can carry us through that season. Is a symbolic way of remembering that the gifts we receive on the mountaintop can carry us through whatever valley we face.